All right, thank you. So as part of the RedSift platform, we have a lot of data that we can sift through, and we're like, how can we use that data to discover trends in the industry? So one of the first targets that we decided to tackle was the financial industry, as they seem to be the most targeted ones and the regular consumers fall through. If you get a text message from your bank or an email pretending to be from your bank, most people that are not quite technically savvy, they can't distinguish the difference between a real fish and a real email from the bank and a phish email from the bank. So the scope of the study we decided to do is we take the top 100 globally recognized retail banks across the US, UK, and EU, and looked for instances of impersonation and brand abuse, mostly like lookalike domains or websites and subdomains, let's say Squarespace, that spammers used to spin up really quickly, use one of the phishing kits that are already in the wild, collect credentials before they get shut down by abuse teams. Our hypothesis is there are going to be a lot of impersonated domains, and we underestimate the amount of fraud that is actually happening behind the scenes. And you ask, it's 2022. Why haven't we done this before? There was no way to easily parse all this data in near real time. And manually reviewing is expensive. Having a warm body classify what's good and bad is expensive. So current technology was not up to the task of identifying and classifying automatically what could be a fish, what is not a fish, what would be a legitimate asset that a bank bought for protection. So how we tackled the problem, like I said at the beginning, we have a trove of data that we could use to analyze all this data and classify it over a period of 7 days earlier this year. So the 100 banking brands that we chose gave us about 15,000 lookalikes registered that look like these banking brands. We then grabbed about half of them and analyzed them even further, and we chose the top riskiest 6,000 that we found in our data set. So you can see here the lookalike on the left, and on the right, what is the similarity with the domain we wanted to tackle. And then we loaded the main domains for all the banks, identified any threats hiding in subdomains for like free web hosters that will give you a free subdomain if you sign up for their free web hosting plan. And then with that data, collect all the evidence. And we went a step further. For the ones that did have phishing kits, we ran in through our computer-based logo detection to see of those lookalikes, of those phishing lookalikes, of those 6,000, how many were using the brand's image and how many were just generic phishing kits, because that's also a big distinction. You can either put a generic phishing kit that can be used and then you send a campaign across all verticals, or you can do a highly targeted phishing kit that is dedicated to a brand. What we found is that DMARC is not done. We might consider ourselves, oh great, banks probably know about DMARC by now. They must protect their assets. But 29% of bank brands either had no DMARC record or had a misconfigured DMARC record. And of the safe domains that brands purchase to not have phishing kits loaded into those websites, we're not in reject. So yeah, the bank may own the domain, but without DMARC, I can still spoof the domain, no matter who owns it. We also found that American banks like DMARC better than European banks. 72% of US banks have DMARC, while only 58% of EU banks have DMARC. So the American counterparts are much more prone to configure their domains in a reject mode than EU brands. The The UK is closely behind the US, and then there's DORA, which is the Digital Operation and Resilience Act, which by 2025 is going to mandate the financial sector in the EU to implement DMARC. So hopefully we can see those numbers creep up in the EU in the coming year, sorry. Also, DMARC is a good signal of strong cyber hygiene. So these stats here basically tell us if the brand has their park domains in reject, there's less lookalikes being spun up than if you don't have your brand in reject, which is interesting. I would have expected it to be the other way around, because if I can no longer spoof your main brand, I'll buy lookalikes to pretend to be you. So this was quite a surprising stat that we found. And then our conclusion is cybersecurity is not a project. It's not a one and done. You have to continuously fight all the threats. If it's not with DMARC, with constant lookalikes, and it's a cat and mouse game. And like build solid processes for takedowns. What happens when you discover somebody using your brand maliciously? Do you have a process for that, or do you just let the hosting providers, abuse teams take care of it when they take care of it and accept it as a fact of life? And yeah, any questions?
Thank you so much, Faisal. I believe you have another presentation. Oh, I think we have a question. Okay, if we can keep these quick, because the more questions we have, the longer you wait for lunch.
So, yeah,
no
I'll be
problem.
quick. So, do you have any tool for searching for lookalike domains, like what could be even abused?
Yeah, so this was all done with our own tool called OnDomain. We used our own in-house tool that you can actually use as well. We loaded the domains. We loaded their logos. Takes about 48 hours for the machine to learn your logo. And then it just starts spewing out data. And we find the lookalikes immediately. The logo detection takes a bit longer. But yeah, this was all done with our in-house platform called OnDomain. And for those of you that are MARC members, in October, we'll give a full-length session with 6 months worth of data and how, because this was done with 7 days worth of data. So in MARC, we'll give a session that will expand on these topics for those of you that are MARC members.
Those of you who aren't MORG members, do check out m3aawg.org, a absolutely essential organization to our industry. So if you don't know about them, you should do. So look them up. Thank you so much for your presentation, Faisal.
Of course.